Pandemic era fact checkers and big tech misinformation flaggers have gotten quite a bit of egg on their faces collectively over the past 2 to 3 years for squelching statements on COVID that didn't align with those of Mr. Science, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and the Biden administration statements that turned out to be right, I might add. So all of these folks who were challenging the science of Dr. Fauci and others were censored. They were silenced. Now, more and more, I mean, even this week, where we're seeing that the Department of Energy is suggesting that there's evidence to say that the virus came from the Wuhan lab, something that was stated early on, only to see those people attacked for saying that and then silenced. So how do we make sure those voices are not silenced in future pandemics? Those that raise questions about the effectiveness of masks, those that raise questions about the vaccine, all this information, the science, if you will, is proving that the critics were right. Now, that question as to how do we make sure those voices have a platform in the future is what Republicans on the House Oversight and Accountability Committee are trying to answer. Join me now to talk about this and more is Congresswoman Lisa McClain, a member of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, as well as the Armed Services Committee and the Committee on Education and the Workforce. She represents the 9th Congressional District of Michigan. Congresswoman McClain, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us a little bit about today's Markup the Discussion and what you hope to do.
Well, actually, today's markup was very productive. And it was productive in the sense that we really called out the hypocrisy that's been happening over the past really 3 years since the start of COVID. You know, at the beginning, we said, hey, why don't we take a look at the origins of COVID? And the left sentenced us. I say sentenced us, but they censured us. They put us on the sidelines. They didn't listen to what we had to say. They kicked us off Facebook. They branded us, Facebook, Twitter. They branded us as conspiracy theories. And then even worse, the White House approved it. So they tried to silence our voice. Now, funny, maybe we're not that crazy. Maybe we actually did know what we were talking about. And see, this is why we live in America, is because the power needs to be in the people's hands. And that's why our First Amendment right is so critical, the right to free speech. So I trust the people. And that is our job, to ask questions.
Right.
And I think what you saw in the oversight hearing today was they had a lot of egg on their face. And it was funny how they tried to pivot, but we didn't let them. And I will tell you, we will continue to have oversight on where the origin of COVID and who's responsible for it, and dig deep into this, because the American people need to know, one, so we don't relive the past, but two, somebody has to be held accountable for this.
Right. I think that is critical, Congresswoman, because if not, I do not think, and there'll be another pandemic. I mean, it's just a matter of time. There'll be something else. But people are not going to trust the government unless there is someone held accountable and we take solid steps to fix it, because we saw, look, they've been wrong on everything. They were wrong on the mask. There's evidence to suggest they were wrong on the vaccines, especially when they didn't take into account natural immunity. We're now seeing, just over the weekend, more information coming out that it does look like this came from the Wuhan lab. And those who brought that up were jumped on. And as you said, they were advancing a conspiracy. So unless they get this fixed, I'll tell you what, I will be first in line not to trust the government.
Well, and unfortunately, that's what's happening, is because the government shouldn't be silencing people's voices, at least not here in America. They should be encouraging their people's voice, because that's what makes us a stronger union, is the ability that we can hear and we can speak our mind, and we question authority. It's follow the science, follow the science, follow the science. How much of the follow the science are we really hearing now from all the other media outlets that ridiculed us?
Right.
Last year, I didn't get an apology.
So we see the Biden administration no longer rejecting the Wuhan lab leak theory. So we see some movement there. But do you think you're going to see those on the other side of the aisle join you in ensuring that all Americans have the right to engage in conversation and, as you said, ask questions?
I would hope that's the case. Unfortunately, hope isn't a strategy. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. I think we need to continue on this path of fact and of science and continue to call out the hypocrisy. I mean, what happened, which I thought was very interesting today in the oversight hearing, was Jamie Raskin kept talking about, well, Twitter is a private entity. It's a private entity. It's a private entity. Well, okay, then let's treat Twitter like a private entity. But they want to treat Twitter, for example, as a private entity with an asterisk. And I think that's what the American people are so disgusted with, is have a rule, have a concept, have a law, but that law needs to be fair and executed no matter what side of the aisle that you're
Right.
on.
But there's mounting evidence to show that the government actually worked with Twitter and the other social media platforms to censor the First Amendment rights of the citizens who engaged on those platforms.
And that's shameful. And now they're trying to cover that up. And we are exposing it. And I will share with you, Jamie Comer is doing a phenomenal job of exposing what has happened over the past 2 years and getting to the truth, which is what the American people deserve, on everything that has happened with COVID. I mean, think about this for one moment. This COVID in essence, shut the world down. Remember, I know in my state, we could only operate at 25% capacities. Businesses went out of companies and small businesses went out of business. Children, look at what happened with COVID, with all of the learning, the drop in learning. Not one oversight hearing until we took the gavel on where did COVID originate. We were just all supposed to follow the science and fall in line behind Dr. Fauci. And what we're seeing now, that was the wrong thing to do. And we are uncovering truths and will continue to uncover those truths in the Oversight Committee. We've just begun.
Let me, a final question for you, Congresswoman McClain, as you serve on what I think is going to be one of the spotlight committees in the 118th Congress, because there's so much to provide accountability and oversight to. What should we be looking for here in the coming weeks? What should we be watching for?
Well, I think you should still continue to watch with where did COVID originate. But I also think on that same COVID theme, what happened to all the money? I mean, we spent trillions of dollars. Where did that money go? Which is the second half of the committee, accountability.
Right.
There needs to be some accountability for these agencies on the taxpayers' dollars. What happened to those dollars? So I think you'll see the oversight, but I think what you'll see a lot more going forward is accountability on here's what you were given. What did you do with the last tranche of money that you got? And was it spent wisely? Did we get value for our dollar? I think you'll see a lot of oversight and accountability on the waste, the fraud, and the abuse. We've already began some of those hearings. I think you're going to see a lot more of those. And there needs to be consequences to those people who committed the fraud and the waste and the abuse.
You're absolutely right, because that's what brings back the trust in government next time we face something like this. Because I tell you right now, the trust level is at zero when it comes to how the government has handled all of this. Congresswoman, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll be back in touch as more information comes to the surface.
Thanks so much, Tony. Have a great night.
You too.